Hello, weird seeing you here. Let's get into my book review. Welcome back to my channel. I decided what I want to do with my channel is if I read a book that has really impacted me, really took over my life at a certain time, I'm going to do a book review on that book. That's what we're doing today. I realized that I needed to do a little series on my channel where I just review one book instead of having like a reading wrap up, just review one book that I thought really took over my life. And that's what we're gonna do. And I feel like that's gonna happen a lot. So why not make it a series? So welcome to episode 1 of the book reviews. As you can tell by the title, it has become my favorite book of all time. And you're probably like, wow, that was quick. I shouldn't have filmed my favorite book of all time video like so quick, but I did. A Thousand Boy Kisses was my number 1 for 2 years. So the fact that this even took the cake for that is insane. And that book is The 7-Year Slip. Literally so incredible. Like I can't even fathom how this book changed my life. I decided my book reviews are going to contain spoilers because I just feel like it wouldn't be a true Sydney book review if I didn't talk about absolutely everything that it made me feel. And there were certain scenes that evoked a certain emotion, and you need the context of the scene for that emotion to be accurately portrayed. That sentence made me feel like a scholar. Anyways, I just need to accurately share my emotions and give context for the scenes that I'm going to be talking about. So I apologize. Let's start with the cover. I love covers like this. I think this is one of my favorite book covers of all time. I'm just biased maybe because it's my favorite book of all time now. I love like the artistic, creative, like almost cartoon covers. And I love those way more than like a cover with a real, there's a kitty cat. Oh my god, there's a cat. Oh my god, sorry. I'm like a cat with a laser pointer when it comes to like certain things. I don't like real people on my covers because I feel like it ruins who I'm picturing, which in the book reviews I won't be sharing who I'm picturing about in these books. It's embarrassing for me and it's embarrassing for the person. It's usually just an actor or like a celebrity I'm really obsessed with, but like still no one needs to know that. You picture who you want to picture, okay? No one's stopping you. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of this book, I just want to say the way this author writes and her writing style really feels like poetry. I love the way that she writes and I love the emotion behind all the words that she wrote. I felt like my soul was getting spoken to, even with the simplest sentences. She just wrote in such an intentional way. Getting that out of the way, let's talk about what actually happens in this book. So I'll go over a little bit of a summary and then my actual hardcore thoughts. And I did do a little bit of a reading vlog because when I was reading it and absolutely sobbing over some of the scenes and sobbing to my mother about everything that was going on, I felt like I needed to vlog it and put it in my book review. Those videos will come in sporadically. But anyways, let's talk about what actually happened. This book follows Clementine. She lives in New York. She has a big position at a book publishing company. She has a particularly bad day at work one day and goes back home to her apartment. This apartment her aunt owned in the past, and she inherited this apartment from her aunt because her aunt had passed away. Her aunt had always told her that this apartment was magical. So this is a bit of a like magical realism story. There is like magic in it, but it's not like a fantasy. It's just like a fun escapism kind of read. And I love books like this where it's not so close to reality, but it is reality so that you're feeling like you're escaping from yours. That makes sense. Her aunt always told her that it was a magical apartment and she had 2 rules for this apartment. One was to always take your shoes off when you came in, and the second was to never fall in love in this apartment. Obviously, neither of those happened. And she was very close to her aunt. Like they would go on spontaneous travel trips together, and she just got so many life lessons, practical and impractical, from her aunt. Her aunt's death had been hitting her pretty hard and sort of made her a bit distant emotionally. That gets resolved, don't worry. So she comes home from a pretty tough day and she falls asleep on the couch and she's woken up by this guy. She doesn't know who he is, how he got into her apartment, and they both are just like, what are you doing here? Like, what's going on? When he woke her up, she realized as she looked around the apartment and looked at the calendar and looked at how the apartment was decorated, that she had been sent back 7 years. That's why it's called the 7-year slip. She is like, you need to go, you need to leave. So she tries to kick him out. Long story short, he ends up staying. She allows him to, and they stay. And she finds out that his name is like, I don't know how to pronounce it, okay? It's spelt Iwan, but it's pronounced like Ewan, maybe. I've heard Ivan, like I've heard so many different pronunciations, and his name honestly has a bit of a slippery slope within the middle of the book. So we'll get into that. Obviously, you'll know if you read the story, it's actually not that crazy. It's one of those like middle name situations. Anyways, we'll get into that later. I'm just gonna go with he until we get to the point in the book that I can actually say a name I know. So they end up spending a beautiful weekend together where he's constantly cooking for her, leaving fresh coffee on the pot in the morning for her, and she's just learning about him, he's learning about her. She's learning that he's like literally such a poet when it comes to making delicious food for people, what makes a perfect meal. He's very passionate about food and the memories associated with it, and he has so many amazing quotes. Like, she was scared about change and new things, and he was like, why would you be scared? And she was like, well, new things scare me. And he's like, there's nothing to be scared about new things. I have so many favorite things that I haven't done yet. And I was like, that's such a cute and optimistic way to look at the world. I found myself in him, I found myself in her, and I think those kinds of stories really just bring you in as a reader, because if I can't like relate to the character, it's not gonna affect me that much. And because I found myself in these characters, it really affected me like no other. She can't pick when the apartment sends her back and when it doesn't, so that's why when they spend the beautiful weekend together and she comes back on Monday night after having kissed him and really just kind of putting her heart into him, she comes back to an empty apartment. And she's back in the present time. So you feel that heartbreak right away. And then she goes literally the whole summer without seeing him. Literally the whole summer. Not a trace. She never goes back 7 years in the apartment. She never sees him in real life. And she was thinking to herself, like, obviously if I don't know him now, then in those past 7 years, he hasn't come back to look for me. That's what she thought, that his present self had never come back to look for her. So at her book publishing company, there's somebody who wants to release a cookbook, and his name is James Ashton. And we never found out his last name, by the way. Remember that. And she decides she's going to read an article of his, because if he's coming in wanting like an editor and a book publisher, then obviously she wants to see what he's all about. So she decides to read an article. The article is talking about memories of your perfect meal, eating pizza on a yellow table, which is the color of the table that they would eat at her aunt's house, the memories of a long lost friend, and love over a lemon pie. He baked her lemon pies during that weekend, and he called her Lemon. That's her nickname, is Lemon. And he never really calls her Clementine, only calls her Lemon. And it's so cute. When I'm in a relationship, I need a man like him, I really do. She's like, what the f***? This is the man that was in my apartment. So she looks at the picture of the author, and obviously it's him. So his name's James Ashton, not Ewan, Ivan, whatever the not him. She has a meeting with James. When she gets in, she's like, nope, that's him. They both have that sort of like longing look in their eyes where they keep staring at each other during this meeting. And at the end of the meeting, he whispers to her, it was really nice to see you again, Lemon. He's also really hot. Like, just to set the scene, like, in my way. You know the Taylor Swift song that's like, he got that boyish look that I like in a man? That's me. That's me. Couple weeks or days, I can't remember, later, they find out that they didn't get to go to like the second round of their meeting type situation. What the second round was is James was gonna get all of the editors and book companies and put them in like a cooking class. They were gonna teach them how to cook. Clementine and her partner, Drew, her editing partner, did not get into the second round. So Clementine's like, I don't know why we didn't get in. Like, she's racking her brain about why they didn't get in, and then she realizes it's her. She knows that he recognized her. And so she's like, okay, it was me. Like, I'm the reason why we're not getting to round 2. So then she goes to his restaurant that he's cooking at. She's trying to get him to rethink his position on things. And she used his own words against him. It was like, don't you say that people are the reason why you do what you do? And he was like, you're using your own words against me. And she was like, yeah. And then he said that that was endearing. And I was like, oh my god, you think that's endearing? I literally, this man is so... He's like, I'll rethink it. They go to the second round. Then they make it to round 2, and during that little cooking class afterwards, he's like, James says, are you hungry? And so they go to this like food truck for fajitas, which is what he cooked her the first night that they met. His friends own the little truck. Clementine and James are catching up, and then his friends come over. They're all just having a very nice conversation. She's talking, her inner dialogue is saying that this is one of the best nights of her life. It's a perfect meal. His friend Miguel is like, when you moved to New York and you met that one girl, what was her name? And he was like trying to recall, and James went like stiff. Like he was like, because when he introduced Clementine to his friends, he introduced her as Lemon, not Clementine. Miguel was like, oh, what's that? What was her name? It had to do with like a fruit or something, or to do with that song. And then he started singing like My Darling Clementine. And he was like, yeah, you never shut up about her. So James had never shut up about Clementine after they met. Anyways. The timeline of all this does kind of not make sense when you first are like learning about the story. Like you're like, is there some sort of butterfly effect? Like they met in the apartment and then 7 years later they're in this thing, whatever. We're about to get to that. When James and Clementine are walking back to the train station after this whole get together, Miguel and his wife like went away. She's like, I do have a question though. Why did you never come looking for me? And he was like, well, I didn't think you'd believe me. And she was like, believe you? About what? And he was like, well, I met you 7 years ago, but for you, I don't think it was that long ago. And she's like, are you talking about the apartment? He knew that the apartment sends you back 7 years. He waited for her for 7 years. She was waiting for like 2 months. He was waiting for 7 years. Second chance romances hit me hard. They are about to kiss in front of this train station. He goes, the timing just never works out, does it? Then they don't kiss. And she turns around and literally runs away. She's like, bye. Peace out. That night when she runs back to the apartment, she walks in, 7 years back, he's there. She walks in, they just like embrace. They have sex, and then they go. It's not detailed. It's explained in a very like intimate, genuine way, not raunchy. So don't worry about that. So after that night where they had like had drinks, had lots of fun, they wake up and he wants to go explore New York. He's explaining to her, we have to go have the greasiest pizza. We have to sit in Central Park where you paint and I read and all this stuff. And she doesn't want to tell him that that can't happen, that he can't leave the apartment. So they're holding hands and they walk out the apartment and then he just vanishes. And she's looking down at her hand and it's now like cold. That's why I was crying. Insert clip. It got worse. It got worse. I feel grief. I feel grief reading this book. Like my mascara is all over my face. Wow, I look like a train wreck. This book, man, one of the best things I've ever read. I don't think a person should be crying this much over fictional characters. Good thing I'm not reading this in public. Please, like, don't mind my appearance or me literally crying. But this book, I just really love this book. I was completely dead after that. She brings her friends to the same food truck that night. She turns around the corner to get some water, like the food truck's here, and she turns around the corner to get water. And he's sitting on the cooler. He's wearing a snapback. Anyways, she looks at him and he's acting very strange. And she's like, why are you acting so like strange? She looks closer and he's hung over. She's like, oh my God, what's happening here? She moves her hair. She has a hickey. He's like, oh, you had fun last night. He was like, did you have a date after ours? She just looks at him and she was like, and he was like, oh my God. He was like, oh, it was that night. And she's like, yeah, it was that night. Anyways, that was just a little funny little quinky dink and I loved it so much. He's actually very, I love him a lot. I need to live in this. Clementine and her partner find out that they did get the book publishing job situation. They go to James's restaurant opening and it's not really anything like he's spoken about in the past. Clementine thinks that it doesn't look anything like him or anything like he's ever spoken about ever. And she tells him that, and he's like, change isn't bad. Like, you need to stop fitting me into this little box. You want me to be the same person that you met 7 years ago. You need to change. You need to let me change. So they have kind of a bit of a blow up. And then she leaves because her partner's wife is giving birth. So they leave. And then she goes through an epiphany where she decides that she needs to quit her job because she's not truly happy. And so this is why I think that a lot of people should read this book, not for the romance aspect, but because it talks a lot about being happy in the career that you choose, in the life that you choose, the daily mundane things that you do, living life to the fullest. And I just think that it really shows like how to be truly happy. So she quits her job because she's realizing it's not making her happy. On the night of her birthday, she goes to a museum that she goes every night of her birthday. And James remembers that. So he comes in and he sees her and he gives her sunflowers. And that's my favorite flower. They both apologize to each other. They realize they can do it. And they do it. They get together, tell each other how much they love each other. And at the end of the book, she's moving out of the apartment and they're living together. That's the book. My storyline may be really mumbo jumbo, which is why you should go read it for yourself. But let's go into some quotes. So, on the basis of life lessons, this is about her aunt. This sadness will last forever. It wasn't a lie. There was sadness and there was despair and there was pain, but there was also laughter and joy and relief. There was never grief without love or love without grief, and I chose to think that my aunt lived because of them, because of all the light and love and joy that she found in the shadows of everything that plagued her. She lived because she loved. She lived because she was loved, and what a lovely lifetime she gave us. And then on the last page, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm just like on the page where he's like talking about how much he loves her, and I just literally can't. Like, I just can't. Oh, like, you guys just had to read this. Like, he says, we finally got the timing right. And she said, a matter of time. A matter of timing. Literally, shut the f up. I can't. Listen. I can't. Like, I literally can't. Just go read it. She's packing up the apartment. That's what she said. Nothing stayed, or so I had always thought. Nothing stayed and nothing lingered, but I was wrong, because there was an apartment in the Monroe on the Upper East Side that was full of magic, and it taught me how to say goodbye, and it was no longer mine. That didn't matter, though, because I carried all of the good moments with me. The walls and the furniture, the clawfoot tub, and the robin's egg blue chair, and the way my aunt danced me around the living room, so no matter where I was, I would always be home, because the things that mattered most never really left. The love stays. The love always stays, and so do we. I journaled in this book. I underlined everything in this book. It's insane. I could literally cry right now. This book makes me so emotional. When she was explaining the apartment, she said, there was a possibility in the sound of the lock clicking open, in the creak of the hinges as the door flung wide, a roulette that may or may not bring you back to the time when you felt the happiest. I literally just can't do it. Like, this book is so good, and any kind of words that I could string together to talk about how amazing this book is will not fully capture all of the emotions that you feel when you read this book. Anything that I say could not accurately describe the feelings of this book. It's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. That is the 7-Year Slip. That is my review on the 7-Year Slip. Obviously, give it 5 stars. Obviously, it's my favorite book of all time now, which is insane because I didn't think that anything was going to top 1,000 Boy Kisses, but it did. And now I don't sound like a middle schooler every time somebody's going to ask me for my favorite book. I really hope that you guys read this book, or if you watch this video, I hope that you read it. I hope that you liked this video. I hope that I can do many more book reviews in the future. And I really like just sitting down and talking. And I think just having a couple sit down chats about life would be interesting as well, because I find myself having a very emotional look on life. And I feel like if we can talk about it and I can find people that think the same as me, it'd be really great. So that was the book, that was the video, and please just read this so you can understand my feelings. I hope you enjoyed this. I apologize if the timeline of the story was a little bit messed up. I was trying to recall everything and I don't have a script in front of me of like what I wanted to talk about. I hope you enjoyed and have a great rest of your day.